Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. And this is a very special episode because it's the Bing Crosby broadcast that has become sort of a yearly tradition for at least two people here. For myself, Anton Garcia-Fernandez, who's coming to you over YouTube from Jackson in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. I am the American co-editor of Bing Magazine, the magazine of the International Club Crosby, and over in England, in a place called Wilmslow, I think I said that correctly this time, is my friend Malcolm Macfarlane, the British co-editor of that magazine. How are you doing this afternoon?
Fine, thanks, Anton. A 6-hour time difference, but we've timed it just right. It's my afternoon, it's your morning.
Well, you sound loud and clear, and it's nice to see you again. This is something we've done for the past 3 years. The first year we talked about Bing Crosby as a jazz singer. The second year we talked about Bing Crosby as a Christmas singer. We went for the most popular and most obvious there for that second year. And last year we talked about our favorite Bing Crosby albums. And when I say albums, I mean albums that were published when he was, or released when he was alive. And this year, we're going to go in a totally different direction. We're going to be talking about music, of course, because it's impossible not to talk about music with Bing Crosby. But we're also going to be talking about another medium that was very important to him and to his career. And so this yearly Bing Crosby broadcast will concentrate on Bing Crosby at the movies. So I just thought I would call it sort of like the Bing broadcast, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes. Very subtle, yes.
Not exactly the opposite of subtle. I agree with that. But anyway, we need to talk a little bit before we start talking about specific movies that we enjoyed and that have been with us all our lives and that we remember particularly fondly. Bing Crosby's career as an actor in general. I think preparing for this broadcast, I realized that Bing Crosby made so many movies. Sometimes we think that, well, he made some movies, he was popular in movies, he was awarded an Oscar somewhere along the way, but we don't realize how many titles he actually made. What do you think, Malcolm, that was that movies meant to Bing Crosby, and what did they mean for his career at large?
Well, Bing, just to set the scene, he'd been involved in dramatic productions at university, so he had his first taste of acting then. But as he got into show business as a singer and so on, filming became a very easy way for him. He could learn lines very easily. Usually in the films he was singing to a playback, a recording that had been made in advance. I think filmmaking was very easy for him and very lucrative, of course. He earned $150,000 a film in his early days, so you can guess what that will be worth today. Of course, it was the Max Sennets that really got him into it. I mean, Sennett had all those silent films, the Keystone Cops and so on, and with the coming of sound, he wanted a singer. And of course, he met Bing on the golf course, and he tried him out with one short, and in the end, they made 6. And they stand up quite well, those little shorts. Very simple stories and so on, but you can see Bing develop through them as a light comedian and as a singer, and it set him on the way. I think his first major films, you mentioned the big broadcast almost, in 1932, and then he made a number of more. He made about 3 films a year, and it's those early films, very wooden in many ways. He was still learning his trade. And I think it's with a film like Mississippi, where it's a period drama, and he plays a man supposed to be the singing killer, and that's when he starts to develop. And then Pennies from Heaven, I thought, is when you start to see the real Bing Crosby in a film. Do you think the same?
I do agree with that, and in fact, Pennies from Heaven is one of my favorite movies by Bing Crosby. Really, I do agree that there is a change in his acting. Something has happened there prior to that movie. I think that he finds his place. He finds his style as an actor, particularly in that movie, and it's also a very important movie in that he works with his dear friend Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, in that movie. And from a historical perspective, it's even a movie that, from the point of view of the fight for civil rights, it is important to note that Bing Crosby insisted on his friend Satchmo getting equal billing, which was just unheard of. It just wasn't done in the United States in the mid to late 1930s.
Because Pennies from Heaven was his first independent production away from Paramount. So no doubt he had a say in who the director would be, who the producer would be, and as we know, who the co-stars would be, and that's how Louis Armstrong came to be there. But no, it's again, that film stands up all these years later, 83 years later. And of course, Bing's singing is absolutely superb in it. Apart from the title song, which he recorded live, which was starting not to happen in those days. A song like So Do I and Let's Call a Heart a Heart. Great songs, and he's in wonderful voice.
I think what you said before is really true. Bing Crosby, in the early films, not necessarily the shorts, but the early movies like College Humor and We're Not Dressing, and films of that kind, he does look a little wooden in some of those, and also I think the music is far more important than the plot. This happens in a lot of musicals, but particularly in these early 1930s musicals, which are just basically vehicles for. It's like a Max Sennett short, but with a plot, with a kind of a plot added, and a little bit more complicated, longer, of course. But the main thing here is the wonderful music. Songs like Black Moonlight, Beautiful Girl, and so many songs that he recorded, which were big hits back then, were made into big hits because of the recordings that Bing Crosby made, but in no small part because of them being featured in those movies.
Yeah, Black Moonlight, of course, he didn't sing that in the film, which is a pity. But his recording still blows me away now when I listen to that. Wonderful.
Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, after Bing Crosby comes into his own as an actor, one of the things that have always attracted me to Bing's acting is just how effortless he makes it seem. Almost like he was just wandering into the set and just playing himself, or of course he has a wonderful speaking voice. We've talked about that many times on these yearly broadcasts. It's not just how well he sings, but also the tone of his voice, the musicality of his voice. But the Bing Crosby of the late 30s, 1940s, 1950s is an actor that just makes something hard seem so easy.
Yes. And of course, he wasn't afraid to ad-lib, make up his own bits of words, especially with the road films, which came later. No, I think he worked very hard, he prepared very well, and as a result of that, he could come across casual and laid back because he was prepared, he knew the material, and he was easy with it. It showed.
You mentioned the road movies, and that brings us into the 1940s. If he made basically a ton of musicals with simple plots and great music in the 1930s, in the 1940s, I would say these are the years of Bing's biggest successes in Hollywood.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, he was top box office star for 5 years in a row in the 40s. Incredible record. He won an Oscar, nominated for another Oscar, at the same time, he was top of the charts, umpteen hits. The 1940s were Bing Crosby's throughout, really. Incredible record, they really were. Before you leave the 30s, though, one film I'd like to mention is Sing You Sinners, because that was a different role, and he wasn't a particularly nice person in it. Singing's great, but it's quite a more dramatic role for him with Fred MacMurray and Donald O'Connor. Interesting to see, and also I don't know if you've seen the film. The fight scene towards the end is probably one of the most realistic fight scenes you'll see, because it's not like all choreographed. It's two people struggling and rolling about on the ground. Very, very natural, really. No, it's a good film. It made an impact on me, Sing You Sinners.
I like that film because of Bing Crosby, but also because of Fred MacMurray, who is an actor that I've always admired and who was also a musical person. He could play the saxophone and even made some recordings in the late 20s, early 30s. So anything with Fred MacMurray, from the tough movies with him as a gangster to the movies for kids that he made for Disney later on, he's an actor I always enjoy watching, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoy that movie Sing You Sinners, which you get to watch sometimes on cable here on in the United States fairly often. Now, going back to the 1940s and the road movies, there's something about those road movies, Malcolm, that is just difficult to explain for me. But I've seen all of them, and there are some that I like more than others. But there's something about those movies that is just endearing, and it's just so natural. I think it's probably the ad-libbing, because if I know you've read all the books, and they all talk about how much Bing Crosby and Bob Hope like to ad-lib on those movies with Dorothy Lamour. But I think there's also something about those movies that I enjoy from the perspective of a spectator, which is how self-referential they really are. I just love that. The fact that, the songs mention Bing and Bob, they mention Dorothy Lamour. Bing Crosby looks at the camera and is almost sometimes talking to the audience. Same thing with Bob. But I just think there's a great rapport between the two of them, between the three of them, I would say, but particularly Bing and Bob, that just makes those movies timeless.
Yeah. There is an argument, of course, did they need Dorothy Lamour, or could it have been any girl? I just wonder about that. I mean, she was there, she's a legend, so that's that. But did it have to be Dorothy Lamour? I don't know whether it did really. But still, her role is locked in time now. But it's interesting when they came to make Road to Hong Kong that initially they didn't want her. And then she was brought in for a cameo at the back of it. Something to discuss in detail sometime. Perhaps get someone to write an article for the magazine about it. Was Dorothy Lamour needed in the road films?
It's a good idea.
The ad-libbing, I mean, when they were rehearsing, they ad-libbed a lot. And then I think what happened, if it sounded good, the scriptwriters wrote it down and incorporated it. I don't think there were many ad-libs just thrown in when they're actually filming. I think it was the rehearsal. The famous one in Road to Morocco, of course, when the camel sneezes all over Bob Hope. That wasn't planned, and I'm pleased they left that one in.
I like the one where Bing Crosby's brother, Bob Crosby, shows up. I can't remember if it's Road to Morocco or which one it is, but
Road to Bali.
Road to Bali, where he
promised him a shot in the picture.
Now it is corny, but somehow every time I see that, I just can't help laughing, and so does my wife, and it is possibly true, that the ad-libbing was not live necessarily, but it does come from them to a certain extent, and not necessarily from the script. And I think that's not easy to do. But I guess they were just such good friends. There were such good rapport between the two of them that they were together on radio, they were together just on the golf course, and that kind of relationship does transfer. It does translate really well to the screen.
They were trying to outdo each other, weren't they? That's what Bob script writers would write something to throw Bing off, and Barney Dean would write something for Bing to throw in as well. And I think they loved that part. Of course, on radio, they really let themselves go there. They didn't rehearse that. They just threw them in and see how the other person reacted.
And that's another thing about the 40s, right? When Bing Crosby was king of records, also at the box office, and then on radio. And I have the feeling that some of the ideas for some of these movies, or some of the ideas for some of the scenes for these movies, must have come from skits on radio, or from conversations that they must have had, and jokes that they just bantered back and forth, So now, do you see Going My Way, which was Bing Crosby's big hit from the point of view of being awarded an Academy Award? Do you see that movie as a serious movie? Do you see it as a musical? Do you see it as a mixture of both? It's a movie that's kind of hard to classify in a way.
I agree. It's very much a mixture, isn't it, really? And the interesting thing in that is just how Bing is more controlled. And his hairstyle's different too, which I think helped a bit. We had a Bing meeting the other day on Saturday, and we showed the songs from Going My Way, and with the scenes leading up to the songs. And there's a lovely scene when he teaches the boys to sing Silent Night, and it's an absolute classic, and it's so natural, and just more controlled than he was in his earlier films. And that may be down to Leo McCarey bringing the hidden Bing out in it, or telling Bing how he wanted the scene played. I don't know.
I also think the presence of Barry Fitzgerald in that movie is very important. I think the mixture of Bing on one hand, the younger priest, and the older man, Barry Fitzgerald, is just wonderful. It just makes that movie a classic.
Absolutely. Of course, with the famous Tour scene when Barry Fitzgerald's in bed, and they drink a toast to their mothers, and then the music box is playing, and Barry Fitzgerald says, "My boy, do you know Tour?" And Bing sings it. Absolute classic scene. Absolutely.
And for an Irish American Catholic like Bing Crosby, it must have been really close to his heart to play a Catholic priest in that film, at a time when such characters were not as common.
No, that's right, absolutely right. Of course, so many people in later years said they entered the priesthood because of Bing Crosby and Going My Way.
Just a different way in which Bing Crosby influenced people through his art. I don't know if there's anything else from the 1940s that you'd like to point out. Of course, those were the years of World War II, and Bing, made a big effort during the war. But to me, the 1940s are just the period of Bing's biggest success in the movies, but in general, and basically all sorts of media.
1942 is a critical year for him. Holiday Inn came out, and he made Road to Morocco. And the recordings he made from those films were incredible hits. Holiday Inn, of course, we've got to mention. The song came from it. White Christmas. It was thought, "Be careful, it's my heart" would be the big hit, but because of wartime, the words of White Christmas meant so much to the people who were apart and abroad and so on. And Holiday Inn is in one of my top 5 films. The cast, Fred Astaire is wonderful in it, tremendous. The songs are great. It's a classic film. I like the colorized version too. I don't normally like colorized thing, but I thought they did that very effectively. And Holiday Inn, a great film. If it had been made in color at the time, they probably wouldn't have made White Christmas.
I often think that, and the reason why I didn't mention Holiday Inn right off the bat is because I knew that that had to be one of the movies on your top five, and definitely one of the movies on my top five. And you will see later, but I kind of cheated a little bit in the sense that I cannot just separate Holiday Inn and White Christmas. Those two movies just go together for me, even though they were made a decade apart. But
Yeah.
it's still.
So you've got a top six now, have you?
That's right. And that's another thing. We were talking about doing a top five, but it is just so difficult to do a top five because I had five already and I thought, oh, this is great. And then my wife would say, well, what about this one? What about that one? Don't you remember that one where he goes to France and the little boy? And I'm like, oh, well, there you go. It's very difficult to just. So yeah, I did cheat a little bit because I do see a connection that I think it's pretty clear between those those two. Now there is a difference between the Bing Crosby of the 1940s and the 1950s as far as his movie production, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And he was trying to make different films. You touched on Little Boy Lost, and we watched that recently with some friends, and it's a tremendous film, really. Bit dark, but Bing's acting is superb, and it's the most reduces me to tears at the end every time. We don't give the story away, I suppose, for our listeners in case they haven't seen the film. But it holds you all the way through, and it's very emotional. And they throw in a few one or two songs which are quite nice. They weren't essential though, but it makes the film more watchable, I suppose. Songs like the Magic Window and things like that. No, I'm surprised he didn't get nominated for that, really, or get some kind of award for it, because it was a tremendous performance. Of course, it set him up for The Country Girl, which followed 2 years later.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things. It's really too bad that Little Boy Lost is so hard to find these days. It's not an easy movie to track down.
I think there's a full version on YouTube. That's well, there was last time I looked anyway. So you can watch it that way.
The last time I watched it, it was on Netflix, but it's not there anymore. At least not here in the United States. It is a great movie, and it does prove that in the 1950s, besides some musicals, of course, High Society is there, and that's a movie that I really enjoy as well. And how couldn't you with Frank Bing and Louis Armstrong all over again and Grace Kelly? But Bing was trying to set his eye on more dramatic roles, more serious films, and not necessarily abandoning the musical per se, but I think he was more interested in trying out something different and becoming more of a serious actor here.
Absolutely. I mean, Just for You. Again, we watched that recently at one of our meetings, and you had to have a meeting like that to sit down with other people and watch it all the way through. Just for You, just to remind you of the story, he's a successful show business producer who's drifted away from his family, and he and his son don't get on, and his daughter thinks she doesn't understand him. And as we watched that, we kept thinking, the first Crosby family, Gary Crosby, think Gary Crosby, and his acting was good, some serious side to it, plus some great songs. You can see him really going down the serious actor route in that one. Of course, The Country Girl, which that is one of my top five, because Bing's acting is breathtaking. That's absolutely breathtaking. The songs are rubbish. They're only there to kind of set the scene, really. But it really is a tremendous role by Bing Crosby. It's so out of character for him. He really, it must have been quite a, he couldn't hide behind his casual, laid-back approach. He had to let his emotions show, and wonderful film. I mean, it's not light entertainment. It holds you all the way through. This alcoholic, what's going to happen to his marriage and so on? Will he make his comeback or not? Wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
That really must have been a challenging role for him, and I feel like every time people talk about The Country Girl, him playing an alcoholic and his difficult relationship with Grace Kelly, with the Grace Kelly character. There's William Holden in there as well, another actor that I admire. But every time people talk about the country girl, there's this comparison with the man with the golden arm, Frank Sinatra. It's almost impossible to, I feel, like talking about one and not mentioning the other. I feel like film critics do that all the time, and I feel like it's a totally different movie. The performance by Bing is dramatic, but I think in many ways it's a little bit more contained than Sinatra's performance, which I also think is great in Men with a Golden Arm. And of course, as we move to the 1960s, and we can come back to the 50s later if you want to, when we start talking about our favorites. I think there's no denying that in the 1960s, with Bing in his late 50s, early 60s, there is a decrease, a sensible decrease in his film activities. Of course, he makes Robbing and the Seven Hoods with the Rat Pack. So he gets to work with Sinatra again, with whom he had worked during High Society in the 1950s. And then there's also the color version of Stagecoach, which I don't know what you think about that movie, or whether it was necessary to make a color version of such a John Ford classic.
I thought it was a good film. It's always going to be compared with the 1939 black and white, but standalone, if you didn't know about that, it's a good film. A lot of good character actors in it, and Bing plays a good part as the drunken doctor. No, I can watch that. When I've shown extracts, people don't like the bit where he makes himself sick. Do you remember that part? Mm-hmm. He's been drinking too much, and he's got to deliver a baby, and he knows he's not capable, so he forces himself to be sick, and puts too much stuff in his coffee and throws up, which he does quite well. That's a good film. Of course, one thing we're talking about, if we're going to talk about the 60s and then so on, the 70s, Dr. Cook's Garden, which was a made-for-TV film where Bing plays a doctor who, on the quiet, kills off his patients who've not got much of a chance. Early euthanasia, if you like, but he selects which ones should go. The ones who aren't good members of the community, people who've done bad things, they seem to die young. And very dramatic role again. Tremendous film. Pity that's not being released, shown again on Netflix or Amazon Prime or somewhere, because tremendous acting. That nice, pleasant, calm doctor who really is a murderer on the quiet. Again, quite an unlikely role for Bing, but he does it very well.
It does show, the variety of his performances. You think of Bing Crosby as a singer who acted, but he was a good actor in his own right, I think, in the sense that, he was natural, at least after a while, forgetting those early pictures. Even though if you compare Bing Crosby in the early 1930s with Rudy Vallee in the 1930s, it's very difficult to be more stone-faced than Rudy Vallee in The Vagabond Lover. But even though he later would develop into a fine character actor, in the case of Bing Crosby, he did develop into a good actor with a pretty wide variety of roles, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. One film we ought to mention, Man on Fire. I don't know if you've seen that. It's difficult to see. It's not often around. He made High Society for MGM, and the follow-up was Man on Fire, a dramatic role about a father trying to get custody of his son. And he starts out as the nice, likeable Bing, and then becomes a very difficult man, desperate to hold on to his son. Great acting. If I had the power to advise him, I'd say, Bing, don't make that film. It's great acting, and you do it very well, and it's a very laudable subject. But it was never going to be a box office success, and it's hardly ever seen nowadays. but his performance is very good. Rest of the cast, no one ever heard of. Well, I think one or two of them, but it's a pity it was made. But all credit to his acting and his desire to make that film, because it was a serious subject that needed addressing, I thought.
Well, I admit I haven't seen that one, and that one's not easy to come by. But
no, it's not.
But don't you think that perhaps Bing Crosby in the movies is a little bit like Bing Crosby on record? That after a while he felt like he didn't have anything else to prove, and he just wanted to work on things that he believed were good and interesting to him. And perhaps that's why he made a movie like Man on Fire, or
Yes, I think he genuinely wanted to make it because it was a good story, and it was an important message for the time. Because he was deeply religious, as we know, and was horrified by all the things that were starting to happen as a matter of course. So I wish he hadn't made that. And then, if again it had the power to him to influence him, I should say, please don't make Say One for Me, because something went wrong with that. It was in colour, all very dramatic, good cast, but it was horrible, really. He must have been talked into it. Be a priest again. He made great success being a Father O'Malley. So it's another story for you. You can be Father Conroy, slightly different story. In it, he looks old. The story's poor. The film drags on, and I just wish he hadn't made it, quite honestly. But then, to me, he bounced back with High Time, which a lot of people don't like, but I liked High Time. It was the Bing Crosby of old, as a 51-year-old going back to college. And it's shown every month on FXM, is a channel in the States. The only film they've got, I think, so they keep showing it. But it's I thought that was Bing Crosby bouncing back, and I was pleased to see it.
In the case of Say One for Me, I would, it says on the internet somewhere that it was included in the 50 worst films of all time, from the late 70s. Now, one thing I would say about that is, having seen the movie, I must agree it's not a good movie. I am happy, though, that they changed the name of the father, and it wasn't Father O'Malley, and it was Father Conroy, so as not to tarnish the good filmic reputation of Father O'Malley from Going My Way and Bells of St. Mary's.
That's right. Yeah, it was a good job. And of course, there's a nice song or two. I like the title song, Say One for Me, and the other song, which I can't remember, where he sings it at the piano with, I forget the name of the song, but it's a nice song. He recorded them both at the time.
I wonder if you mean I Couldn't Care Less.
Yes, that's right, thank you. Oh, and The Secret of Christmas, of course, which is a great song, a very underrated song, The Secret of Christmas. He did it in the film, recorded it in 1959, then recorded it again with Sinatra, Sinatra's album in 1964. It's a lovely song, lovely words. Very few people have recorded it. Julie Andrews got a nice recording of it. Yes, it's deserves more, The Secret of Christmas.
It's one of those Christmas songs like I'm Doing My Christmas Dreaming a Little Early This Year that not many people have recorded, and they're good songs that are just lying around somewhere waiting for them to be revived. Now, as we enter the last years of Bing's life in the 1970s, Bing Crosby had been making a lot of TV appearances, particularly his highly rated Christmas shows every year. He made some work for TV films, as you mentioned before. But in the 1970s, he almost appears in no movies. Of course, there's That's Entertainment, and that's an important thing there. But what would you highlight from those years of the latter day Crosby?
Well, he was semi-retired, wasn't he? He was only working 90 days a year. He was picking and choosing his guest appearances and so on. And of course, he had some ill health too, which slowed him down somewhat. But he nearly died, as we know, in late 73, early 74. But then I think it gave him the urge to come back, and he made TV spectacular, if you like, in that August '74 with Bob Hope. And then his Christmas show in '74, which just been shown recently in the States on Get TV. I don't know whether you've got the Get TV channel, but they showed all Bing's Christmas specials from the '70s, '71 to '77, one after the other, all day long on a loop. Somehow copies of them have reached the UK, and I watched the '74 show, knowing that Bing had only just come back from nearly dying, and he's back to his best in that. He does a most complicated sketch, I suppose, called based on the story of the trial of Father Christmas, when he plays all the characters. And it must have been taken ages to put it together, and he sings the whole script really, and it's very impressive. It's well worth catching if you get the chance to see this 1974 show. So I think he was keen to be back involved in show business. He came to the UK in '75. Everyone he went in the UK, people wanted to interview him on their show, so he kind of got dragged in. He appeared on the Vera Lynn show and other shows as well. He recorded his Christmas show here, and it really gave him the appetite to get back into show business. And then, of course, as we know, he started to do concerts again because he was hungry. He was keen to entertain, and it gave us that wonderful last 2 or 3 years of his shows, which meant so much to so many of us, and of course really helped his career. Really, he'd been fading out, and then he came back with a bounce. I mean, the 1976 Palladium show, I'd seen his TV shows, the one with Fred Astaire in '75 had been shown, and it was nice and all that, but Bing wasn't exactly singing strongly. But then the Palladium, we were blown away by the power of his voice and the charm of the man, how he just charmed us all throughout the whole appearance. But we're getting away from films. I'm sorry about that. I just got carried away there.
No, but before we move on to the top 5 favorite Bing Crosby movies that we have both prepared, I don't want to forget to mention Bing Crosby's wonderful narration of the Ichabod Crane story.
Yes.
Washington Irving. This is really a fantastic job by Bing, doing a lot of the characters, not just one, not just the narration, but also singing the songs and doing the voice for several of the characters. It is my daughter's favorite. She loves to watch it around Halloween every year.
Yes.
And she even did when she was 2 or 3, and now that she's 6.5, she just wanted to watch it this year, and that made me very happy because that is definitely her introduction to Bing Crosby. But that just proves what a versatile artist he really was, and what a wonderful voice he had for not just singing but also narrating. I must say that for little kids, that is a great introduction to the work of Bing Crosby.
A bit frightening at the end, though. I remember my kids liked it until the end bit, and they got a bit frightened at the end, you know.
She did look away from the screen a few times, during that final part, and it's just a wonderful cartoon. Of course, Basil Rathbone is in there as well, with Mr. Toad, and so you get both stories, Wind in the Willows and Ichabod Crane, and I just wanted to mention that because it's one I've always enjoyed, and the songs are also fantastic on there. Every time I watch it, there's a couple of songs that just stick with me, and I just can't get them out of my head. Particularly that beautiful song Katrina. That is just if you turn that into just a regular love song, take it out of the movie, and maybe change the name of something. I think it could have been a big hit. But anyway, I just didn't want to forget to mention that.
No, that's right. Yeah.
You're listening to the Jazz Flashes podcast, our Bing broadcast today, our yearly Bing Crosby broadcast, which incidentally, it's video number 200 on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. So we've done about 200 videos in about 3 years and a little more. So, that's
Good
not bad.
heavens.
And several of them have to do with Bing Crosby, and we've done one a year with my friend and fellow co-editor. Although I must say he does most of the work. That it should be the editor, and I should be the co-editor because he does most of the work. And for everybody out there that knows about the ICC, the International Club Crosby, most of what you read comes from our contributors, but it's put together wonderfully by this man that I'm talking to today here on the show, Malcolm Macfarlane. So, Malcolm, it's wonderful to have you here and having the chance to chat about the film career of Bing Crosby, which sometimes gets a little overlooked because people that remember Bing remember him for his recordings. Many times we talk about him around this time of year because of his Christmas recordings, but he was not just a fantastic singer, but also an accomplished actor. And so it is very difficult to choose 5 favorite films, but what I would like to do now in this final part of the show is to give you the chance to go film by film and review your 5 favorites. We will see if they coincide with mine, and if there is a difference, then I will add whatever differences there may be at the end. What do you think?
Fine, okay, yeah. Are we going to do it in reverse order?
Sounds good.
I'll kick off with my number 5, a film we've mentioned earlier, Holiday Inn. Words and music by Irving Berlin. Fred Astaire, Bing Crosby. Useful little story, nice little story. One I can watch over and over again. Holiday Inn.
Well, Holiday Inn is also in my top 5. I didn't do it in any particular order because that would really be even more difficult. And as I said before, whenever I think of Holiday Inn, I think of White Christmas as well. Even though if I have to choose, I would probably watch Holiday Inn before White Christmas. I think it is a better movie. It has better songs, and it's just a really important movie in the career of Bing Crosby. It has White Christmas. Without Holiday Inn, as you said, probably White Christmas would never have been made. And, it's not really a Christmas movie. It's more of a holiday movie in general. People tend to think of it as a Christmas movie, and it is, but it is also a movie about all of the other major holidays here in the United States. And one of them, has unfortunately made the movie less watchable these days, and it doesn't get played on TV as much as White Christmas, mostly because of a specific number that makes sense within the movie, but is dated in the 21st century. But leaving that aside, I think it's just a classic, and I watch it as much as I can, and I watch it every year, and not only at Christmas. Sometimes I watch it just during the year.
Being often said about White Christmas, he said, well, we didn't think it was going to be a great thing. It was done without much of an elaborate scene, and he kind of says it was almost thrown away, but it wasn't. The whole crucial bit at the end, the final scene, is all about the song White Christmas, when the lady starts to sing White Christmas, and she sees the pipe, and she taps the bells, and then Bing Crosby comes in. A wonderful moment that gets me every time. Mm-hmm. So White Christmas was certainly used as the main part of the film, really. Very, very important. So I think that's forgotten sometimes. People think the only scene was that time when he's at the piano in the Holiday Inn singing, but the whole finale was based around the song White Christmas.
And there are other great Irving Berlin songs there. Let's start the new year right. Be Careful, It's My Heart, which Sinatra also recorded with Tommy Dorsey. And of course, I'll Capture Your Heart, which I think it's a delightful number, which actually does something. That's why these movies, I think, are so self-referential sometimes, because when you see Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire singing and dancing together on that number, you realize how different they are when it comes to singing. Their styles are completely different, or very different at least. But they just work really well together.
Yeah, it was a clever song, that was, wasn't it? A very clever song and clever production, the way it was filmed. Very, very well done.
Well, that was number 5, Holiday Inn, and that was also on my list. What's the next one?
Well, I go to number 4, again, a film I've mentioned before, The Country Girl. Being incredibly good acting. He should have won the Oscar. Who is this Marlon Brando anyway? But his acting was tremendous. It's not easy watching, because it's a bit dramatic at parts, but very good film. As I said before, the songs weren't great, which is amazing, really, when you see who wrote them. Was it Ira Gershwin and Harold Arlen? Was it?
I think so. Yes, I think you're right.
And whether they were told just dash these off because they're not supposed to be important, but there we are. Good film, very good film. So that's number 4 on my list.
It's also on my list. I must say, that movie from 1954. I've seen it many times, and I just like the way that Bing Crosby portrays this man and all of his inner demons, and how he tries to work on solving the problems that plague him. And this shows not only how destructive that the problem of alcoholism can be for one person, but also how it impacts everyone around you. And I think for that, I must commend Bing Crosby for choosing this role, because it really is an amazing movie, and it's one you don't hear about very often, but it's one that I absolutely, and with no reservations, I recommend to everyone out there. On to number 3 then.
Well, I've got to have a road film in there, and to me the best road film was Road to Morocco.
And that's also on my list, I must say, going back to 42.
The third one in the series, and it's a joy throughout, absolutely joy throughout. Good songs as well.
I just think, to me, Road to Morocco, and I have a good friend who teaches in Kansas, Pablo Martinez, and he is also a member of the ICC, and he and I talk about Bing Crosby quite a bit. And we just believe that Road to Morocco is the quintessential road film, because of the crazy plot, because of the great songs, because of the great playing. Of course, the series gets a little bit different as time goes on. Some of the later movies maybe are not as good as the earlier ones, but this one to me is just the quintessential, and just everything that you would expect from a road movie is in there. All the elements are in there, and just the songs are fantastic. From the romantic classics like Moonlight Becomes You, to the happy-go-lucky ho-hum, to those really funny songs like Road to Morocco, like Webster's Dictionary, We're Morocco Bound. I mean, could you get any better than that? Could it be any cleverer than that? I don't think so. I'll bet you 10-1 that We Meet Dorothy Lamour. They're playing already with the expectations of the public, because they know that Dorothy Lamour is going to be there at some point. Whether she needs to be there or not, she's going to be there, and we know it. So it's really a classic, and I totally agree. Well, so far it's 3 on your list and 3 on mine as well.
Right. Well, the next one will be on your list, I'm sure. My number 2 is High Society.
Absolutely. 1956, the year that rock and roll and Elvis Presley changed the musical scene. Bing Crosby, Grace Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and of course the great Satchmo in there as well. Great choice, Malcolm. What do you like about that movie, or what is there not to like about that movie?
Well, that's right. It's a joy throughout, isn't it? Some film critics are sniffy about it because they say, "Oh, it's not as good as the Philadelphia Story," on which it was based. All right, some of the same dialogue is used in High Society, but I don't care. It's Bing Crosby, it's Frank Sinatra, and the songs are great. Cole Porter's songs, it's a joy throughout. I mean, some years ago, there's, not far from where I live, there's a big old theatre, which with a big theatre organ. It's used for special occasions, and they were going to show High Society, and of course I've seen it many times. And I went along mainly because a friend of mine called Roy Chappell, a Crosby fan, was going to be singing beforehand with the organ. And another friend of mine is very keen on organs, so I went along just to see that and report back, intending as soon as the film started to leave. Of course, film comes on and I see the first scene. Anyway, I stayed throughout. I was held, again, although I know the dialogue virtually, I was held throughout, watched all the way through. Tremendous film.
That happens to me very often with Crosby films. If they're on TCM or on some channel here, even if I catch them already, halfway through or a third of the way through, I just have to watch them the whole way.
Yes.
So that's why, sometimes I turn the TV on hoping that there isn't a Crosby movie, because if there is one, I know I'm not going to be doing what I'm supposed to do, grading papers or preparing classes or something like that, or cleaning the house because of Bing. And this one is particularly good in that it is obviously a remake of the Philadelphia Story, which is a classic as well, of course. And I love all the actors on the Philadelphia Story. But it is not necessarily the same kind of movie in that, there are enough differences to make it its own film. And the songs by Cole Porter, it's one of the really latter-day Cole Porter at that, are wonderful. And they also play on this idea that Bing Crosby is a jazz singer, not just a pop singer, not just a Christmas singer, but they do put the focus on his relationship with Louis Armstrong, and on jazz in this film, and I like that. I think that was very clever.
When the film was first shown over here back in the late 1956, when it got to Now You Has Jazz, there was spontaneous applause from the people in the cinema, which you don't often get people applauding in a cinema. And I show it as one of my talks on great musicals. I slot Now You Has Jazz in. And again, people, mind you, in the actual film, people applaud at the end. And my audience often applauds as well, because they've enjoyed it so much. They've been carried along by the song. Of course, True Love was a huge hit. And I don't know if you've seen, but Harry Connick Jr. has just brought out a new LP on Cole Porter. And it's almost a tribute to High Society and True Love. He was on the Royal Variety performance last week in huge production over here, and that was his song. He sang True Love, not as well as Bing, of course, but he sang it quite adequately.
It looks like Cole Porter didn't think much of True Love. It's a song that he wrote in 5 minutes or something, and it became a big hit. And it's interesting that even Elvis Presley recorded that song. So we're talking about 1956, the music of the past in a way, and the music of the future, or the music of the moment, which was rock and roll. And the biggest rock and roll icon of the moment, Elvis Presley, turns around and buried on the B-side of the album Loving You, you can see his own deeply felt version of, or you can hear his own deeply felt version of True Love. So there's something about that song that just transcends genres.
They have a radio program over here on the BBC Radio 2 on Sunday mornings called Sunday Love Songs, and True Love is on about every couple of weeks, being singing True Love.
Now, Cole Porter did write some good numbers in that for that movie for Sinatra as well. Your Sensational is a fine song.
Oh yeah.
I've always wished Bing had sung that one as well, and I don't know if he has or not, but I have never heard it.
Yes, he has. Oh yeah, he sang it on radio. Yeah, it's around. Yeah.
Well, I need to find it, because that's one I haven't heard, and I've always thought Bing should have made a commercial recording of that, but of course that was Frank's song in that movie. And then, what do you think about their duet in that song in that movie?
Absolute classic, wasn't it?
I think it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. It is a very clever song as well. So Yeah, just a great all around movie that brings the talents of many talented people.
I think Bing was very proud of Well Did You Ever, because he really stands out in that with Sinatra, and I think he was very proud of his performance in that.
And just like the writers of Sinatra's and Crosby's radio shows from the 1940s, the lyrics again play on the characteristics of each singer, and also play on the rivalry between the two of them, which had faded by then. It was not like in the 40s anymore.
Yeah. You must be one of the newer fellas in the classic Lion.
Well, so far, again, out of 4. So if we transfer this to cricket, this would be a century at least.
Yeah. My top song, my top film, You Won't Have, but it was the first Bing Crosby film I saw, and it made me a Crosby fan for life. This is way back. I must have been in my height. I must have been 17 or 18, and I went to see a Dean Martin film, Martin and Lewis. I like Martin and Lewis, and the film on with it was a 1946 film starring Bing and Fred Astaire called Blue Skies.
Oh,
and
no!
I was blown away by it, and again, the songs are great. Irving Berlin again, it's in colour. It's superb. Fred Astaire's fantastic, and there's quite a story, quite an emotional story, and a lovely emotional ending, which gets the tears flowing. It'll always be my favourite because of it was the first thing that really convinced me that I should be a Crosby fan.
So basically, you became a Crosby fan because of Blue Skies.
Yes, I mean there was another part to it as well, in that it's the mid to late 50s, and rock and roll's there, and I'm a rock and roll fan. The BBC radio didn't play much rock and roll. If you wanted to hear modern music, you had to listen to a pirate station, well, a commercial station, not a pirate station, commercial station called Radio Luxembourg. 208, your station stars. You may have had it in Spain. I don't know.
Yeah, that's also the radio station that began playing the Beatles in the 1960s.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Anyway, amongst all the rock and roll, there was a 15-minute program called Bing Sings, and it was on, and it went into me like osmosis. Really, I took it all in. I had an uncle who was a great 78 collector, and if ever I went round there, he'd get out all these old 78s and play people like Arthur Askey and thing, and then Crosby, of course. So again, it was all going in. But the clincher was Blue Skies. I wanted to see more of Bing, and I not long started work, and the chap on the next desk was a Crosby fan, and he came in one day. He bought this record, Bing with his Buddies and Bows, it was called. It was an LP. So I had to buy that too, and I never looked back. So Blue Skies is my top of the list. It won't be anybody else's top of the list, I don't suppose, but it was a very good film and very successful too at the time.
Well, in baseball terms, that was a curveball if I ever saw one, because I never, or maybe a Yorker or something, because I didn't, I never thought that one would be the one. I've seen it and I like it because, I think I've told you before that my wife's favorite, one of my wife's favorite actors is Fred Astaire,
Right.
along with Cary Grant, but Fred Astaire in particular, she loves Fred Astaire, and so we've seen together lots of movies with Fred Astaire, and of course this is one of them. It's got Bing and Fred and Joan Caulfield. Really, really good movie. I agree. It's just one of those that you hardly ever hear about, but it's precisely for that reason. I think it's great that you dug it up and you dusted it off and brought it to the attention of the listeners, because I do agree it's a movie that's not on my list, but mostly because I tend to forget about it, and and that's mostly the reason why it is a great movie with music by Irving Berlin, and it's one of those that you can be sure that I will be looking for to watch again this Christmas.
So what's your last one of the top five?
Well, the last one of the top five, I was thinking of going my way, but no, I decided not to put that one in. I like Little Boy Lost. I didn't put that one in either. It's Pennies from Heaven, going back to 1936. It's not number one because, as I said, I didn't really make it. I didn't rank it, but I just for some reason I just love that movie. I love Louis Armstrong, and it's always wonderful to see Bing and Louis together. Very, very often I've wondered, I've wished that he had made more movies or more records with Louis Armstrong, because there is a rapport between the two of them that, in a different way, but also in a similar way, it's like that of Bing and Bob. They understand each other really well. They have respect for each other, and musically they're so very much in tune. So to me, Pennies from Heaven is a movie that has to be there among the top five Bing Crosby movies. If I had to only choose five to take to a desert island, provided that they had something to play them with over there, that would be one of them. Pennies from Heaven from 1936, and as you mentioned before, that is a movie, Malcolm, where we do see a little change in Bing's acting. So it's even important from a historical perspective in Bing's movie career. Every time I talk about Bing Crosby, I try to put also some emphasis on his work for civil rights. Before civil rights were even called civil rights, before there was even such a movement, Bing Crosby was there, helping out. But not because he wanted notoriety, but because it was something that just came naturally to him. He admired people no matter what color or religion, what color the skin was or what religion they followed. And that's something that sometimes gets forgotten when it comes to Bing Crosby. And this is a really early example of that. 1936, America was not that way in 1936, and Bing Crosby was able to do this because, as you said, he could call the shots at that point, and he called the right shots. It's a good movie. It's not a masterpiece, but it's always been close to my heart. So it has to be among, and it's also one of the first movies by Bing Crosby that with Bing in them that I saw. Probably the first one was White Christmas, but this one came not long after. So I always have fond memories of Pennies from Heaven. And of course, there's so many that are left out, but at least we've touched upon them over the course of the broadcast. And now that we're winding it down, I simply would like to ask you, just to finish this, some kind of final comments. How important do you think that films and Hollywood was for Bing Crosby? How much of his legacy really has to do with the movies? How important are the movies in the legacy of Bing Crosby's career?
Well, I think they're very important indeed. Bing's career really, he started off as a singer, he became an actor, and then he became a personality. That's how I saw his career develop. Some of his last film he made is well over 50, 60 years ago. But White Christmas gets dusted off every year. It's on the television. It's been shown at one or two cinemas in the States, I know, for the odd day. It's very important to his legacy, absolutely vitally important. It's the only way a lot of people know who Bing Crosby was. And High Society, of course, again, very important film in maintaining Bing's legacy. And then perhaps people will then want to discover some of the other films when they see these films. And the road films, of course, you don't hear them so much now, but until recent years, they were everywhere. Road films. They don't seem to have been shown lately on our television over here. No, but you haven't seen them much over there lately either, which is a pity. Road to Bali, because it's in colour, that pops up now and again because it's not the best, but it's very watchable. Road to Bali.
So how would you to finish? How would you define Bing Crosby as an actor? Like what qualities did he have that made him, a good choice for the movies that he starred in? How did he develop as an actor over the decades? How would you qualify him as an actor? Was he a good actor? Was he a not so good actor? Did he take it seriously? Did he not? What do you think as a spectator?
Well, I think he developed into a very good actor indeed. Starting from the late 30s, he was honing his craft. He developed his Bing Crosby character. He always joked that he only played Bing Crosby, but there were lots of variations on Bing Crosby. Dr. Cook's Garden, Man on Fire. Because he's so likeable in films, it's quite a feat for him to be unlikable. And Man on Fire, you go off this character. You're charmed by him first, but the way he behaves unreasonably, you go off him. And that's acting, to be able to do that, I feel. Stagecoach, well, he played that role very effectively. No, he was a good all-round actor, certainly from the 40s and 50s onwards. Lots of depth in there. Going My Way, Bells of St Mary's. That final scene in Bells of St Mary's, when he calls Sister Benedict back and tells her she's got TV and she thanks him. Thank you, Father. It's tremendous. You watch that scene where the look on his face while he's thinking what to do and say and whether to call her back, and then he finally decides, Sister Benedict, and back she comes, and he's working out what to say, and he swallows and very carefully explains it to her. That's acting. It really is superb acting. I touched on Just For You because, having watched it in detail the other week, lots of good scenes in there where, worried about his son and his daughter, and when you know what his private life has been like. And Little Boy Lost, of course, his wife has just died in real life, and then he has to film a scene where he's discussing the death of his wife in the film and how she was tortured by the Nazis and so on. How he got through that scene, I have no idea, but that's superb acting. And The Country Girl, as we said before, that's acting of the highest order. So he went from being a light comedian, bit wooden, into a very good character actor, an all-round actor, I feel.
I agree with that, and I feel like sometimes he doesn't get the recognition he deserves for that. And I think it happens to a lot of actors that have made a lot of musicals and a lot of comedies. It feels like film critics sometimes tend to value dramatic acting over comedic acting or over films with songs in them. And I do think that out of all the different endeavors of Bing Crosby's career, records, films, and radio, and TV, he gets the least recognition, in my opinion, for his acting in movies. And that's just a feeling that I have. I don't know if it's true or not, but reading different books and articles and things, I feel like we tend to forget Bing Crosby, the movie actor. And we think of Bing Crosby, the singer, and we think of Bing Crosby, the radio star, the man who changed the media. We think of Bing's TV shows, the Christmas ones in particular. And we tend to forget that he made so many really good movies and in which he actually acts in a very accomplished manner. So that was one of the ideas for this year's broadcast, was to just bring to the fore Bing Crosby's acting abilities.
Well, people talk about all kinds of famous actors, but not many of them have been nominated 3 times for an Oscar. Bing was.
And he earned one, and he probably could have been nominated for more, like we mentioned before. But then again, the movies are there, and that's what's left. and that's what we have to appraise, to watch, to enjoy, and to decide for ourselves what we think of Bing Crosby as an actor. Because as a singer, we must agree that he was one of the most important voices that the music of the 20th century gave us. And as an actor, well, that's also an important contribution that he made over the decades, starting with the King of Jazz and Paul Whiteman in the 1930s and going all the way to the 1970s. Malcolm, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I really look forward to these yearly talks, yearly broadcasts about Bing Crosby, and this time we've kept it to just about an hour and 10 minutes, which is not bad, bearing in mind some of the earlier ones were much longer. Thank you so much, Malcolm Macfarlane, my friend and colleague from the International Club Crosby. Let's just remind the audience to finish how one can become a member of the International Club Crosby, in case somebody is listening to this and they have no idea what we're talking about. Would you think that they should perhaps go online to Bing Magazine?
Yes, go online, type in Bing Magazine, or type in International Club Crosby, and all the details are there. And contact, depending where you're based, if you're in the States, contact Anton or Perry Huntoon. And if you're in the UK, Michael Crampton or me. We'd love to hear from you. You'll be amongst friends.
That's for sure. Thank you so much, Malcolm. And, I hope you have a Merry Christmas that you enjoyed with your family and friends. And I know you're going to listen to a lot of Bing Crosby, so I'm not going to wish for that because I know that's going to happen. It's not a wish, it's a reality. And, we'll be in touch throughout the year, of course, because of the magazine and cricket and other things that we share in common. And hopefully in a year from now, we'll meet again for another one of these Bing Crosby broadcasts.
Thanks very much, Anton. Merry Christmas to you and to your family.
Merry Christmas to you and to all the listeners. This has been our yearly Bing Crosby broadcast here on the Jazz Flashes podcast. You can listen to it on the YouTube channel Anton GF. This is actually show number 200 on the channel. And mine is the copyright. I'm Anton Garcia-Fernandez talking to you from Jackson, Tennessee, in the United States of America. The year is 2019, the month of December 2019. And, we will see you again before too long here on Anton GF, the YouTube channel. Listen to Bing Crosby. Merry Christmas, everybody.